Namaste and welcome to a very special session on the GenZ uprising in Nepal, causes, consequences, and road ahead. To talk on this very special topic, we have very special guests. We have Professor S.D. Muni, who is senior most and well-known expert on Nepal. We also have GenZ Vivek Dhos Thapa, who is also the program coordinator and research associate at NICE. And we also have a political leader, Usa Kiran Timsina, who is a central committee leader of one of the major political party of Nepal, CPN-UML, which is led by former Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Oli. We all are aware by now what is happening in Nepal. The GenZ uprising was a spontaneous revolt of a frustrated generation against decades of political stagnation and corruption. Unlike traditional political-led movement, it is decentralized, digitally driven, and fueled by the urgency of systematic change. GenZ has challenged the old political order within days, seeking the very foundation of Nepal's political structures. Their strength lies in number and energy, but their future will depend on unity, vision, and organizational capacity. Whether it endures or fragments, the uprising has already redefined Nepalese politics and inspired a new sense of accountability. However, many things are still uncertain, and it is in this context we have organized today's discussion. First, we have Professor S.D. Muni. Professor S.D. Muni is a member of IDSA Executive Council. He was a professor at JNU, where he has taught more than 40 years. He has been associated with numerous reputed institutions like National University of Singapore, Banaras Hindu University, University of Rajasthan, and many others. He served as India's special envoy to Southeast Asian countries and worked on United Nations security reforms. He has represented India at ministerial level at different occasions. Then we have Usa Kiran Timsina. Usa Kiran Timsina is a Central Committee member of CPN-UML and a graduate of sociology from Tribhuvan University. She works on issues related to digital threats, misinformation, and hate speech in politics. A young leader who come to prominence during the UML's 10th General Conventions. She has been an outspoken advocate for accountability, transparency, and reform within her party. She continued to highlight the importance of democratic values and timely election in Nepal's political landscape. And we have GenZ Vivek Dhos Thapa. Vivek Dhos Thapa is a program coordinator and research associate at NICE. His research focuses on new technologies in international relations, India's neighborhood studies, and security. He was a visiting research fellow at Institute of South Asian Studies, Sichuan University, China. He is currently pursuing his master's degree at Department of International Relations and Diplomacy, Tribhuvan University. Let me start with GenZ because they are the one who are in talk today. So first of all, let me ask maybe one or two questions to Vivek so that we can understand what the whole issue is about. Vivek, there are lots of speculations going on right now, but what would it be like? Let me ask you, like, what is the whole issue all about? How it started? What are the demands? And what you have experienced because you had participated in the movement that took place. So that is, let me, I think I want you to first start how this movement took place and what we see at the moment. Vivek, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the kind introduction. I also want to say quickly, I say hi to all my friends. I think this is the first time they're joining in a debate like this. So let me start by introducing what GenZ means. Many people are not understanding what GenZ is, and they are thinking it's an organization, or they are even using it synonymously with the term youth. But in fact, Generation Z or Gen Z, also informally known as Zoomers, is the demographic cohort, and these are the generations that came after the millennials and before the generation Alpha. So this generation is loosely defined as the people born between 1997 to 2012. And if you put it in the context of Nepal, most of the Gen Z or Zoomers have seen it all. Starting from the civil war, they've seen the monarchy, the people's movement. They might have been too young to comprehend it back then, but on hindsight, they have made sense of everything. They remember the process of promulgation of the constitution, how delayed the whole process was. Back in the days, I remember we even made jokes like we were kids when this process started, the process of promulgation of constitution. Now we are going to finish our teenage years, yet there is no sight of getting a new constitution. And this generation has also deeply felt the tremors of the 2015 earthquake and the blockade that followed shortly after that. The only ray of hope this generation saw, I think, was when the constitution was finally promulgated in 2015. We all thought that finally the transition period was over, and now it was time for our country to see its full potential in development. But we were proven once again so wrong by these political elites who turned the state into a game of musical chairs, carving institutions for each political party to get a cut or fight for a cut. And as the years passed, it only started getting worse. Corruption has kept on increasing. Since 2015, corruption in Nepal has remained deeply entrenched and has shown little or no real signs of improvement. And it even like now continues to worsen over time. According to Nepal's Corruption Perceptions Index, the state of corruption has only gotten worse over the years. It remains consistently in the list of highly corrupt countries, and the trend clearly shows that governance has not strengthened. Corruption has only become more systematic and institutionalized in these past few years. This was largely because of the government's own failures. They were engaged in political bargains and power sharing deals between major political parties, which made anti corruption efforts meaningless. And leaders were also involved in protecting their allies instead of enforcing the law. It's our irony that even agencies such as the Commission for Investigation of Abuse of Authority, the police, even the Revenue Investigation Department all face constant interference and bargaining. And this generation has been very fed up with this trend. This has led to most of them leaving the country in search of better opportunities for themselves and their families. But not all people can go abroad. The situation is so bad that there is corruption even if you want to go abroad too, from manpower agencies to airports. I think it was not long ago that we came to find out that people had to pay middlemen, and they were being allowed to go to countries on visit visas where they would settle down. And politicians with big names were also arrested because they were involved with middlemen taking money from common people to pose them as false Bhutanese refugees and go abroad. So there has been corruption in every aspect of society in Nepal. You want justice, someone knows the judge. You want a government job, someone knows a person who can make it happen. You want to register your new startup company, you have to pay the officials and get it done today. Or if you don't want to pay them, you have to go to the same office for 1 year, 2 year. Still, you cannot get your company registered. These are just some examples. There is a common consensus among the Gen Z that if you have either power or money in Nepal, anything is possible. So these politicians have lost all their shame. They did not care about the what the common people had to say at all. Uh, there were instances where they were even caught red-handed with proofs directly linking them with corruption, but they had just been shrugging it off and brushing it under their carpets. And all of this has been boiling the anger and frustration of the Gen Z for a very long time, but it has had just not been spilled over until September 8th. But way before September 8, out of this frustration, something had been brewing on social media. I think it was from late August that the Gen Zs of Nepal started making reels with pictures and videos of the Nepo babies going on foreign trips, flexing their designer purchases, expensive cars, showing off their misuse of the state services, like walking around with the member of armed forces. They're portraying them as their bodyguards or servants, something like that. And the Gen Z started writing captions with compilations of pictures and videos that they collected from the social media of the Nepo babies. And they wrote captions such as, "Our parents paid taxes so that they can enjoy this lifestyle." And working Gen Zs were also making videos of themselves going to work saying, "Working hard to pay taxes so that these Nepo babies can fund their next foreign trips." This had been going on. And the spilling point for this boiling pot of anger and frustration came when the government decided to ban the social media in Nepal in the name of regulating it. I would like to clear out the narrative being spread in international media that this protest was not sparked by the ban on social media. The ban was done. Everybody knew it was done, but it would not stay that way for long. But this ban was perceived by the Gen Z as a message from the government. The elites can do anything that they want to do, and the people can do nothing about it. The government has the right to dominate, and people should just shut up. And when people were speaking up against corruption online, the government outright shut their voices. Then, under the similar videos that I was mentioning earlier, post of Nepo baby trends, a new caption started to emerge. September 8th, Mighty Mandala. This is how this movement started. There were no leaders, there were some some social media personalities emerging who were giving the instructions on safe and peaceful conduct of the protest, what the agenda should be, and some people from legal backgrounds were giving advice on law during the assembly of people, what to do if you get arrested, and things like that. But there was no one person central to the protest or a defined organizational structure. So this is how this protest was organized and started.
Okay, thank you, Vivek. Let me raise one more question because there was massive violence and destruction of public property, which are of great historical values during the protest. Is this the only way we can have change in Nepal at the moment?
Okay, sir. So regarding the violence, I think the protest on September 8th and the protest on September 9th shouldn't be looked at in the same manner. Let me tell you why. The September 8th protests, they were planned to be more peaceful, and they were not led to casualties because of the Gen I think it was largely due to the failure of the state, the security agencies, and the intelligence agencies that happened. And the protesters had done all the needful things that needed to be done. They had taken the necessary permission from Kathmandu CDO office to gather at the Maitigar area. The authorities knew that there was a huge unrest brewing in the street. Firstly, the intelligence agencies failed to analyze and predict the gravity of the situation. It seemed like the authorities were caught completely off guard during the protest. And initially, the environment during that time was a very jolly one. People were singing, dancing, along with throwing chants against the government and corruption. They were not in a mood to start agitation at all. They were just there for peaceful protest. But looking at hindsight on how the events of September 8 unfolded, I remember noticing some groups in the crowd. And if you're someone who has been following the protest of Kathmandu, it won't be hard for you to distinguish who was what there. Not all people there were on their own accord or acting independently. The protest had been infiltrated, which wasn't shocking because it was anticipated by everyone who were going to protest. I cannot say the same for the what the security agencies were thinking, and because it was a crowd of more than 12,000 people. The thing was, some volunteers were also mobilized to snatch troublemakers and hand them over to the police. But the turnover was way more than what the people expected, the Gen Z expected. 12,000 people, and the volunteers were maybe 10 at most. Second, the preparations for the control of the protest was very bad from the side of the administration. The police had one line of barricade in front of the Everest Hotel. This is usually where all the protests are stopped. Mind you, this is the first time in the history of Nepal where the protesters have reached to till the BICC, uh, the house or the parliament building. And the police had just one barricade in front of the Everest Hotel. There were hardly 100 police officers deployed there, and with they had one barricade wall, they had two water cannons. That was about it. The protesters coming from the west were trying to break through the wall. The west is from the Maitigar area where most of them had gathered, but there were people coming from other directions also, and some volunteers were trying to calm the crowd down, but and the police were already overwhelmed. It was only a matter of time before the crowd would break through. Then suddenly crowds who were coming from the north, east, and southeast started rushing police from behind their lines. They dropped the barricade and police started retreating. It looked like they had no other line to fall back to, which forced them to go inside the parliament building. Now, while all of this was going on, the Home Minister, along with the Home Secretary, the Chief of Nepal Police, they were all inside the parliament building. They were attending a parliamentary committee. They were at fault because they didn't understand the gravity of the situation. They were extracted, but things were now about to blow out of proportion. The principle, what I saw there was that the principle of reasonable use of force was completely ignored by the security forces. Firstly, they were using tear gases, but I don't think it was having much effect on the crowd. I did not see any blatant charges happening. I think it should be first you should try to calm the crowd using your voice. Then you should like try to intimidate them by beating your sticks with your shields, suppose, and then you could do your blatant charges. Nothing happened. All I saw was that they started shooting. They were not aiming below the legs. They were shooting very recklessly. These kids who had been gathering to stay as a peaceful protest, they were being shot in their heads. I literally saw their brains coming out of their head. The death of 19 students and the Gen Z protesters had already agitated the entire country, but it did not stop there. And so, what reaction would you expect from the people
Okay.
when you see unarmed children dressed in school uniforms gather for peaceful protest, being killed in and shot in the head?
ओके लेट मी गो टु द नेक्स्ट स्पिकर उषा किरणजीलाई म एउटा क्वेसन सोध्छु र उहाँ ओपनिङ रिमार्क्सहरू दिनु होला लाइक नेपालको वर्तमान अवस्थाको लागि कति हदसम्म राजनीतिक दलहरू जिम्मेवार छन् किन तपाईँ पनि एउटा राजनीतिक दलमा आबद्ध हुनुहुन्छ यस्तो व्यापक असन्तोषको अवस्थामा पनि दोस्रो पुस्ता नेताहरूले आफ्नो नेतृत्व किन स्थापित गर्न सकेन किनभने एउटा एउटा अपर्च्युनिटी थियो एउटा मौका थियो त्यस्तै प्रमुख राजनीतिक दलहरूको भावी कार्ययोजना के हुन्छ जस्तो लाग्छ हजुरलाई अनि के तपाईँको पार्टीको वरिष्ठ नेताहरूले दोस्रो पुस्तालाई हस्तान्तरण गर्ला त अहिलेको सिचुएसनमा के तपाईँ यस्तो के जनताले यस्तो अपेक्षा गर्न सक्छन् र नेपालको राजनीतिमा जेनजीको भविष्य के होला यही कुरालाई लिएर हजुरले 10 मिनट बढीमा आफ्नो विचार राखिदिनु होला धन्यवाद
सबैजनालाई नमस्कार प्रोफेसर एसडी मुनि अनि मैले रोजी कटेल दिदी देखेको छु मैले चिनेको सबै पार्टिसिपेन्ट्सलाई नमस्ते अनि म तपाईँले सोधेको क्वेसन्सबाटै जान चाहन्छु अस्तिको हाम्रो सेप्टेम्बर 8-9 को प्रोटेस्टलाई चाहिँ यो एकैचोटि भएको अनि यो चाहिँ एकैचोटि यो रूपमा विस्फोट भयो भनेर बुझिनुहुन्न जस्तो मलाई लाग्छ यो चाहिँ विगत संविधानको घोषणा भएदेखि हामीले जब नयाँ संविधान बनायौँ त्यस पछाडिका राजनीतिक घटनाक्रमहरूलाई चाहिँ यहाँ जोड्नुपर्छ भन्ने मलाई लाग्छ यो 10 वर्षमा चाहिँ यो पावर सेयरिङ यो खास गरी प्रधानमन्त्री बन्ने विषयमा चाहिँ जस्तासुकै टेक्निकल कुराहरू जुटाएर पनि अनि निश्चित नेताहरूको पहुँचमा चाहिँ जसरी यो शक्ति र सत्ताको बाँडफाँड हुँदै आयो यसलाई जसरी म्युजिकल चेयर बनाइयो र जनताका तमाम एजेन्डाहरू जस्तो के भने हामीले नयाँ संविधान पनि विभिन्न पृष्ठभूमिहरूमा पाएको थियौँ जस्तो भन्नलाई चाहिँ दलहरूले 72 वर्षको लडाइँबाट प्राप्त गरेको त्यसपछि के अनि राजतन्त्र पछाडि अनि जनयुद्ध पछाडि यो सबै कुराहरू चाहिँ जस्तो हामीले जनतालाई चाहिँ यस्तो धेरै प्रतिज्ञाहरू गरेका थियौँ कि हामीले चाहिँ एकदम जस्तो नेताहरूको एकदम म चाहिँ त्यो सस्तो लोकप्रियता भन्न चाहन्छु उहाँहरूले चाहिँ स्विजरल्यान्ड जस्तो बनाउने अनि एसियाको मिनिमम स्ट्यान्डर्ड मिट गर्नेदेखि लिएर थुप्रै कुराहरू चाहिँ हामीले जनताको बिच प्रतिज्ञा गरेका थियौँ तर संविधान नै घोषणा भइसके पछाडि चाहिँ जसरी हाम्रो राज्य सत्तामा म्युजिकल चेयर जसरी यसको खेल भयो र त्यसका बिच अनि यो हामी जब आवधिक निर्वाचनमा प्रवेश गर्यौँ त्यस पछाडि को सबै खाले अभ्यासहरूका कारण जनता चाहिँ एकदम धेरै निराश एकदम धेरै फ्रस्ट्रेटेड जस्तो मान्छेहरूले चाहिँ नयाँ राजनीतिक व्यवस्था सँगसँगै आफ्नो देशको प्रस्पेरिटी अनि आफ्नो जिन्दगीमा त्यो प्रस्पेरिटीले पार्ने प्रभावका बारे मान्छे जसरी सपना देख्न थालेका थिए त्यो सपनाहरू मिट नहुँदै गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ अस्तिको फ्रस्ट्रेसन आयो भन्ने मलाई लाग्छ र अर्को कुरा चाहिँ फेरि जसरी यो बिचमा माओवादी र नेकपा एमाले बिच गठबन्धन भयो चुनावी गठबन्धन भयो चुनावी गठबन्धन पछाडि जसरी त्यो झन्डै 2/3 सरकारले दुई पटक संसद विघटन गर्यो त्यस पछाडि मान्छेहरू राजनीतिक दलप्रति विश्वास गर्ने भन्दा धेरै अविश्वासहरू पैदा हुँदै गयो र त्यो सबै आइपुग्दाखेरि हाम्रा सरकारी डाटाहरूले देखाए अनुसार देशमा के छ भन्दा देशमा भ्रष्टाचार छ देशमा के छ भन्दा देशमा बेरोजगार छ यो सबै कुराहरूले चाहिँ अस्तिको विस्फोटन भयो र त्यसलाई हामीले किन रोक्न सकेनौँ भन्दा फेरि जसरी हाम्रो पार्टीको नेतृत्वकर्ताहरूले जसरी बाहिर चाहिँ डेलिभरी दिन सकेनन् भित्र पनि त्यसै गरी अन्तर्पार्टी लोकतन्त्रको घाँटी निमट्यो जसरी जे गरेर पनि जुनसुकै सेटिङ मिलाएर पनि एउटै व्यक्तिलाई वर्षौंसम्म त्यो पार्टीको कार्यकारी ठाउँमा चाहिँ त्यही व्यक्ति आउनुपर्ने जस्ता अभ्यासहरू सबै खाले थुप्रा अभ्यासहरू भए जस्तो नेकपा एमाले जस्तो पार्टीले चाहिँ तपाईँको राप्रपालाई पनि नेकपा एमालेको चुनाव चिन्हबाट चुनाव उठाउन दियो तर नेकपा एमालेकै जो अन्तर्पार्टी लोकतन्त्रमा प्रतिस्पर्धा गर्न चाहन्थे ती मान्छेहरूलाई चाहिँ पार्टीबाट यो चाहिँ मैले एक्जाम्पलको रूपमा भने टिकट नदिने खालको व्यवस्थासम्म पुग्दाखेरि चाहिँ हाम्रो हातमा त्यो अस्तिको मसाकर अस्तिको त्यो ध्वस्तता हात परेको छ र यसका लागि जवाफदेही को हो भन्दा अभियसली यसका लागि जवाफदेही जो अस्तिको दिनसम्म सत्तामा थियो, सत्तामा वा प्रतिपक्षमा छ, ती सबै शक्तिहरू अस्तिको दिनका लागि भागीदार जवाफदेही छन् भनेर म भन्न चाहन्छु। र अर्को कुरा भावी कार्ययोजना के छ भन्दा चाहिँ जस्तो अब अहिले चाहिँ फेरि यस्तो धेरै ब्युरोक्रेटिक सिस्टममा छ नि त हाम्रो पार्टी। त्यसपछि म विदिन द पार्टी मेरो पार्टीभित्रको कुरा गर्दा चाहिँ मान्छेहरू बल्ल हामीले विगतमा गल्ती गरेछौँ, विगतका अभ्यासहरू हाम्रो संविधानलाई ट्याली गर्न सक्ने खालको संविधान सम्मत, अनि हाम्रो पार्टीको विधानहरू चाहिँ सबै विधानमै मात्र त्यो त्यो हाम्रो वास्तविक जिन्दगीमा एप्लाई भएन। त्यसकारण हामी कसको चाहिँ नालायकी थियो त्यसमा, हामी को जवाफदेही हुनुपर्ने थियो त्यसमा भन्ने विषयमा भर्खर हाम्रो साथीहरू चाहिँ बल्ल यो सामाजिक सञ्जालहरूमा विभिन्न ग्रुपहरू बनाएर भर्खरै छलफलहरू गर्न थाल्नु भएको छ र बल्ल हामी आत्मआलोचना गर्नतर्फ लाग्नुपर्छ, हामी चाहिँ रिस्ट्रक्चरिङतर्फ लाग्नुपर्छ भन्ने खालको छलफलहरू भएको छ। र जसरी यो जेएनजीको आन्दोलन पछाडि नयाँ सरकार फर्म भएको छ र त्यो सरकार अन्तरिम सरकार हो, चुनावी सरकार हो, र हामीले आगामी दिन कसरी तय गर्छौँ भने यो सरकारलाई आजको फेरि पनि हामीले त निर्दलीयता चाहेको होइन, जेएनजीहरूले नि माग गर्नुभएको छ कि उहाँहरूले त एन्टी करप्सन र यो रिफर्मको कुरा नै गर्नुभएको छ। अनि यो व्यवस्थाप्रति उहाँहरूले आफ्नो प्रतिज्ञा गर्नुभएको छ, उहाँहरूले सङ्कल्प गर्नुभएको छ। त्यसपछि यो व्यवस्थालाई अब हाम्रो हात परेको यो शून्यताबाट, यो अन्तरिम सरकारबाट हामी कसरी आगामी घोषणा भएको चुनावलाई प्रयोग गर्न सक्छौँ, हामी जनताका बिच कुन प्रतिज्ञा लिएर जान्छौँ, हामी कसरी माफी माग्छौँ, हाम्रो सङ्कल्पलाई जनताले कसरी पत्याउने छन् भन्ने विषयले हाम्रो भावी कार्ययोजना पनि निर्धारण गर्छ भन्ने लाग्छ। अनि आज हाम्रो पार्टी नेतृत्व हस्तान्तरण गर्ने मुडमा छ कि छैन भन्दा अब पहिलो पुस्ताका हाम्रो पार्टीको चेयर बाहेकहरू सबैका मैले कुरा सुनेको छु। उहाँहरू फेरि पनि आलेटाले कुरा गरेर फेरि पनि यो शक्ति चाहिँ आफ्नै हातमा रहोस् भन्ने जुन मनोविज्ञानमा देखिनु भएको छ, त्यसले चाहिँ हामीलाई फेरि पनि दुर्घटनातर्फै लग्छ भनेर म भन्न चाहन्छु। र अबको जेएनजीको कुरा चाहिँ जस्तो हामी गणतन्त्र ल्याउँदाखेरि चाहिँ हामी जेएनजी थियौँ, मतलब आजको जेएनजीको उमेर समूह जुन हो, हामीले 2006मा गणतन्त्र ल्याउँदा चाहिँ हाम्रो उमेर समूह त्यही नै थियो। हामीले चाहिँ जस्तो आन्तरिक रूपमा चाहिँ आन्तरिक अरू बाह्य रूपमा चाहिँ यस्तो धेरै आवाज उठाउँदै आइयो कि यो सबै भएन, यो भएन, त्यो भएन, एनसेलमा चाहिँ तपाईँको ट्याक्स चलियो, यो विभिन्न यो बिचमा भएका भ्रष्टाचार काण्डहरूमा चाहिँ त्योसँग सम्बन्धित मान्छेहरूलाई जवाफदेही बनाउनुपर्छ भन्दै चाहिँ आयो। तर हामीले पनि यो निर्णायक आवाज उठाउन सकेनौँ, निर्णायक भोइस उठाउन सकेनौँ। तर मोरल्ली हामीले उठाएको आवाजहरू चाहिँ जहिले पनि दबाइने गरियो, नसुनिने गरियो। त्यसका प्रति चाहिँ म तपाईँहरूसँग पनि आत्मआलोचना गर्न चाहन्छु, किनभने हामीले उहाँहरूले सुन्ने गरी, उहाँहरूले देख्ने गरी हामीले त्यो आवाज चाहिँ अझ ठुलो ह्युज बनाउन चाहिँ सकेनौँ। त्यसका लागि चाहिँ म तपाईँहरू सबैसँग माफी चाहन्छु। तर सबै मतलब यो सार्वजनिक वृत्तमा थाहा भएको साथीहरूलाई चाहिँ थाहा छ जस्तो लाग्छ मलाई, किनभने हामी जहिले नि पार्टीभित्र पनि आउटसाइडर जस्तो अनि आउटसाइडर जस्तो जहिले पनि हामी चाहिँ प्रतिपक्षी जस्तो पनि हुँदै आएका छौँ। त्यसो भएर मैले चाहिँ यसलाई ठुलो बनाउन नसकेकोमा आत्मआलोचित हुँदै आजको जुन परिस्थिति हामीसँग छ यसलाई पनि हामीले एकदम धेरै सिरियसली ह्यान्डल गऱ्यौँ भने मात्रै हामी एउटा सामान्य राइट ट्र्याकमा हुन सक्छौँ जस्तो मलाई लाग्छ। र आज जेएनजीले जे गरेको छ, यत्रो ठुलो उहाँहरूको बलिदान, यो सबैलाई चाहिँ म एकदम हामीले एक सेकेन्ड पनि बिर्सिनुहुन्न। र जहिले पनि यसका लागि चाहिँ म रेडी छु। र जेएनजीको माग पुरा गर्नका लागि पनि फेरि पनि हामीले हाम्रो व्यवस्थालाई बलियो बनाएर, हाम्रो स्टेटलाई बलियो बनाएर, ट्रान्सपरेन्ट भएर, अनि तपाईँको एकदम धेरै जवाफदेही भएर मात्रै हामीले जेएनजीको एजेन्डालाई, जेएनजीको भावनालाई सम्बोधन गर्न सक्छौँ भन्ने लाग्छ। यो भन्नुको मतलब दलहरूले सम्बोधन गर्नुपर्छ भन्ने कुरा मेरो हो। अहिले यति भने, हस्, धन्यवाद।
Dhanyabad. If I have to put the whole thing into one sentence, I think she want to portray that only opposition in Nepal is the youth at the moment, it's not the political party. म तपाईँलाई एउटा प्रश्न फेरि उठाइहालेँ, किनभने एउटा आइरहेछ नि, जस्तो दशकौँ लामो जनयुद्ध लडेको पार्टीले 10 महिना पनि शासन गर्न सकेन होइन। 10 महिना पनि प्रचण्डको पहिलो कार्यकाल थिएन। 5 महिनामै उदय भएको रवि लामिछानेको पार्टी राजसभा पनि 5 महिना पनि टिक्न सकेन, जबकि युवाहरूको ठुलो आशा थियो त्यो पार्टीमा। अब 2 दिनमै सत्तामा पुगेको जेनजी 2 महिना टिक्ला त, कि जेनजी भित्र पनि विभाजन र फुटको अपेक्षा गर्नुहुन्छ?
यस्तो जेनजी चाहिँ त्यो फिजिकली पुग्यो कि पुगेन भन्दा जेनजी फिजिकली नपुग्ला, तर यसको एजेन्डा चाहिँ यो सत्तामा पुगेको छ र यसलाई पुगेन भने हामीले जेनजीको एजेन्डा भनेर हामी भन्दा डिफ्रेन्ट एजेन्डा होइन नि त यो। त्यसपछि यसलाई हामीले छोड्नु हुँदैन भनेर मैले अघि नै भनिसकेँ। जस्तो 10 वर्ष जनयुद्ध चाहिँ लड्यो, उहाँहरू युद्ध लड्न चाहिँ पोख्त हुनुहुन्थ्यो, तर उहाँहरू जनताको अपेक्षा अनुसार सत्ता चलाउन चाहिँ त्यति इलिजिबल हुनुहुँदो रहेछ भनेर मैले बुझेको छु। किनभने आजै पनि जसरी प्रचण्डले प्रतिक्रिया दिनुभएको छ, उहाँले हामी पार्टी कार्यालय भव्य बनाउँछु भन्नुभएको छ, जबकि हाम्रो जेनजीहरूले ज्यान गुमाएको जेनजीहरूको आज चाहिँ आर्यघाटमा शवयात्रा भइरहेको छ। त्यति बेला उहाँ चाहिँ आफ्नो पार्टी कार्यालय चाहिँ भव्य बनाउँछु भनिरहनु भएको छ। अनि तपाईँको फेरि के भने यो पार्टी पोलिटिकल पार्टी स्थापित हुनलाई चाहिँ यसले लामो कोर्स तय गरेको पनि हुन्छ। त्यसपछि म यो रवि लामिछानेलाई टिप्पणी गरेर, यद्यपि हामीलाई नेतृत्व गरिरहेका दलहरूले रवि लामिछाने आउने स्पेस बनाएको हो भन्ने हामीलाई थाहा छ, तर रवि लामिछानेले त्यो त्यो बोक्नु सक्नु भयो त, त्यो भार भन्दा त्यो बोक्नु सक्नु भएन। तर उहाँले उठाउनु भएका केही एजेन्डाहरू फेरि पनि हामीले एकदम धेरै मनन गर्नुपर्छ, स्मरण गर्नुपर्छ भन्ने मलाई लाग्छ। र यो तिनटै कुरा, जस्तो तपाईँले भने जस्तो 10 वर्ष जनयुद्ध लडेर आएको अनि 5 महिनामै स्थापित भएको र 2 दिनको भन्नुभएको छ नि, मैले अघि भनिसकेँ यो देख्न चाहिँ मेनिफेस्टेसन चाहिँ यो 2 दिनमा भयो। तर यो कहिलेदेखि हाम्रो सोसाइटीमा यो बोइलिङ भइरहेको थियो भन्दा यो त 10 वर्षदेखि भइरहेको थियो नि त। त्यसपछि अनि मलाई कता न कतै यो जेनजीको प्रतिनिधि को हो भन्दा जेनजीको प्रतिनिधि भनेको यदि स्टेट स्ट्रङ भएर आयो भने त्यो नै जेनजीको प्रतिनिधि हो। त्यसपछि जेनजीको आज जे भएको छ मैले भनिहालेँ, यो सबै ठुलो धन जन यो सबैलाई हामीले स्मरण गरेर अलिक उठेर बिउजेर हामी हिँड्यौँ भने यो जेनजीको आन्दोलन तुइन्छ कि तुइँदैन भन्दा जेनजीको यो भावनालाई जहिल्यै सम्बोधन गर्नुपर्छ लाग्छ मलाई। धन्यवाद।
Thank you so much. Let me move to Professor Muni. Professor Muni, you have followed Nepal since ages. Like you have seen the evolution of democracy in Nepal. You have seen the fall of monarchy. You have seen the rise and decline of Maoist and the role of all the political parties. So how responsible do you think the political leadership is for the current chaos? That is one. And given this, are you hopeful for the stable democratic trajectory ahead? Do you have any hopes? Because I think youth had no hope, and all that chaos that happened is at the moment. Still, I'm not very hopeful. So how hopeful you are at the moment, sir? Over to you.
Well, Pramod, thank you very much for inviting me. I am, of course, a foreigner to Nepal, and I don't really have a right to conclusively draw conclusions on the Nepali politics. I am a student of Nepalese politics, and as a very sincere friend, because I always say Nepal is my first love. I did my PhD on Nepal, started working on in 1967. And since then, I have been working on Nepal. So I'm grateful to you. Now, as I see the past history or contemporary history of Nepal, Nepal is a history of people's uprising against injustice, against authoritarianism, against a new future. And every time the hopes are aroused, and eventually they disappear into various other forces and does not deliver. I mean, this has started since the anti-Rana revolution, when the Ranas were thrown out, and there was a hope that the Gorkha Dal and Nepali Congress would be able to work together. They did not work. Elections happened, and it was thought that Nepali Congress and the king would be able to work together. Somehow it did not happen. Later on, it was given a promise that Panchayat system would deliver to the people. It did not deliver. And later on, the Maoists had a dream of what you call New Nepal. And I was quite excited that these people are committed, they have laid their lives, and they would probably shape Nepal in a different way. But soon it appeared that power became more attractive than principles. The ideologies were set aside, and the individual gains and losses become so important that the close allies, the leadership of Maoist movement started disintegrating. And as you all know, the way Dr. Baburam Bhattarai and Prachanda fell apart from each other, and various interventions took place. So that was a dream completely vitiated by the kind of what you call ambitions for power of the leadership. And unfortunately, that is what it has continued since the elimination of monarchy. So I am quite puzzled and disappointed because the hopes aroused have not really been fulfilled. Now, this is a new phase which has come up. My friend Thapa is absolutely correct that youngsters, or not necessarily call it by any name, Gen Z or whatever, the young people have always been in the forefront of people's uprising. And they have taken the cudgels. When BP Koirala fought against the Ranas, he was a young, enthusiastic blood which had a lot of creative ideas, lot of positive ideas. So were Baburam and Prachanda. So were Girja Babu when Panchayat system went out. So I mean, this is not qualitatively a new phenomenon which has happened. But this time the lead is taken only by the Gen Z. And, they are quite technologically savvy. They are very confident Nepalese. I find that the young Nepalese are far more confident and far more aspirant because they have been exposed to various developments which has taken place in the world. They have gone to the outside. They have access to communication and information which has aroused their aspirations. And they have taken this a step out of quite a frustration. But as Ushaji also mentioned, and everybody knows in Nepal, this is not a new thing which I am saying, that the Gen Z doesn't have a leadership. Gen Z has passions and emotions, and they have a vision in their mind that this is what this country should be. But that's a vision which earlier, every time there was a people's rousing, it was portrayed like that. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. All of us have great faith in people with integrity, people with honesty, independence, and courage who can speak against the forces which are very odd about it. And I find Sushilaji fits in that bill very, very effectively and quite correctly. And as she has taken years on her, she is not passionately driven and she is not that emotional. There is an element of maturity about it. So I think for any better results, Pramod, I would feel that Gen Z must sit down together and firstly draw an agenda. What they have is an objective. Corruptionless Nepal, a Nepal which is truly democratic, a Nepal which meets the aspirations of its people, where there is equality. Nepal has grown. It is a kind of a growth without equity. Last 2-3 years, more than 3%, around 4% growth is taking place. But the distribution of the fruits of the growth are so highly unequal that only a handful of people are having advantage of it. So, it is good to have a vision, but the pathways to that vision, the road to that vision, how to travel it. And this is where the personal ambitions always intervene. And we have seen it, even in terms of the constitution of the cabinet, there are divisions within the Gen Z. And, all kind of tensions are there, even in terms of what should be done first, what should be done later. why my representative or my nominee has not been accepted. These are petty matters when you have a big vision. And I would expect, we still pray and look towards Gen Z to sit down and, if I use this word, not in any pejorative sense, but in a creative sense, put the house in order. And once the Gen Z puts its own house in the order, I'm quite sure that in even old political parties, as Ushaji said very rightly, none of the major political parties are internally democratic. None of the leaders in the political parties have not been challenged, not controversial. And there are struggles within Nepali Congress, within Maoist, which shows that there are people who want to take the nation on the right path. So the Gen Z must collaborate with them, harness this kind of energy, which is spread all over the country, and ensure that there are two other major vested interest or entrenched interest. One is, of course, the bureaucracy, and the second is business. And I think Gen Z must sit down and have very hard negotiations with them, both with the bureaucracy and the businesses, that a broader picture of national welfare and national development has got not only to be drawn, but has to be pursued. And for that, if there are compromises to be made, if there are sacrifices to be made, they have got to be made, those sacrifices. And on the top of it, I think the interim government, Sushila ji, has already announced her agenda, and very rightly so, that the 8th and 9th, whatever injustice has been done to people and the kind of violence which was unleashed has got to be investigated, and the culprits have to be brought to justice. So this is a minor administrative step, but so far as turning Nepal into the Nepal of dreams and expectations, I think what has to be done is that the gap between the objective, the vision, and the energy through the roadmap, how should we go about it, with the help of a very creative leadership, has got to be drawn. And if this challenge cannot be met, then I'm afraid the Gen Z revolution will go the way other revolutions and other uprisings in Nepal have gone. We don't want that to happen, but we must keep our fingers crossed.
Thank you, sir. Let me come to one brief question, like how does New Delhi view the Gen Z protest? And I just came to know that video conference between the Prime Minister of India and Nepal is taking place in 2 or 3 days. So how is India going to accommodate the new changes that we have? Again, will Gen Z be able to gather international support, as government need huge support for reconstruction and election? Similarly, what implication does this have on India's neighborhood policy and the regional stability? Over to you, sir.
Well, it's a very tricky question, Pramod. So far as India's role is concerned, it is not without blemish in Nepal. And even in the recent years, I find that at the time of formation of the constitution, there was an undue interference by Prime Minister Modi and Jaishankar when the constitution had already been accepted by the Constituent Assembly. Though it was not through debate, and I mean, there was a lot of rushing through on the constitution. Let me not go into those details. But that was not correct. And what happened afterwards, in terms of what you all call economic blockade, and I call it economic coercion, to bring about certain, was not good. That had really distorted the whole picture. There was some issues of political power. So I don't see that India has always been able to play the ideal role which it has announced that we would like to play. This is a problem. This is a problem with all the external powers. What happens is that the external powers have defined their own strategic objectives in a particular given situation. And their priority is always of pursuing those strategic objectives rather than the ideological parameters. Be it India, be it United States of America, be it China, anybody say. United States of America, throughout the Cold War, has been talking about democracy and freedom. And the kind of options they have chosen military governments, they have chosen dictatorships in one way or the other, they have violated human rights, they have killed people. So you see the gap between the promise and the practice of the external powers, because they have their strategic interest, and India is no exception to that. But India has a very special and a different relationship with Nepal, which is not defined only by the strategic objectives of India, because civilizational and cultural relations are there, geographical contiguity, which is unusual, and the kind of relationship we have maintained. So there is a lot of twisting, or there is a lot of tempering of the strategic relations with the human angle, human dimensions of it. And I hope that India of Prime Minister Modi, and whosoever later on comes as his successor in the coming years, would look at Nepal even from its own objectives, and see that its objectives are pursued properly. I give you an example. In the late 50s, or after the Rana Revolution, even Nehru was talking about a representative assembly and a republican system. And still the Republican constitution could not be drawn properly there. And then what happened was that we always said two-pillar policy. Always Nepal's policy is two-pillar policy. We have a constitutional monarchy and we have a representative executive, representative government. The monarchy refused to remain constitutional, and that aroused a conflict. And there, obviously, India opted for more of a democratic order, and at the same time made compromises on democratization. So, the past is not always the perfect guide for future. We have got to amend, we have got to rewrite and redefine your past in order to translate it into future. So all I can say is I hope that India would now, having seen the experience of the past years, have must find and help Nepal become a neighbor which is forward-looking, which is progressive, which is independent, self-confident, and still have very good and amicable relationship with India as a state, because Indians as people will always have amicable and friendly relations with Nepalese.
Thank you, sir. We have received lots of questions, but let me raise one question to each participants, and then I'll ask them to respond. First, one question from Vivek, like, what are your expectations from this uprising, and what should be the future trajectory? Should a person like me living abroad once again dream about coming back to home? So someone from abroad has raised this question. The question for Usaji is that, in the light of recent GenZ protests and the growing wave of public discontent towards political parties, how do you see the future of Nepal political parties evolving? अहिलेको परिस्थितिमा जसरी चाहिँ पोलिटिकल पार्टिजहरूलाई चाहिँ मन पराइरहेको छैनन्, एउटा वितृष्णा छ, त्यसमा चाहिँ पोलिटिकल पार्टिजको फ्युचर कस्तो छ र कसरी पोलिटिकल पार्टिजहरू आगामी दिनमा इभल्भ हुने देख्नुहुन्छ? To Professor Muni, there is one interesting question that for the first time, probably, His Holiness Dalai Lama has wished Prime Minister of Nepal, Karki. Even former PM of Tibet in exile has also wished for the same. If China reads current change or government as anti-China or against China, and if they link it with the Tibet question, how do you look at the geopolitical rivalry evolving in Nepal in days to come? And second, where do India stands on this? So let me start with Vivek. Vivek, over to you.
Okay, so thank you. That's a very important question that has been raised. Before I start, just a disclaimer, I am not aligned with any Gen Z groups right now, and whatever I'm saying is just my personal view. And I largely share the consensus of the Gen Z among two things. Number one, no, not again. These political leaders and their parties, they have carved up our country for long enough. They have proven themselves incompetent time and again, so now would be a time for them to rest. And number two, a thorough investigation for corruption is needed. And we've got our new Minister of Home and Legal Affairs just yesterday. So I think the government should now start moving towards the investigation phase for corruption. And I think it's high time that we put an age ceiling for people running in public posts. This can be debated with proper research and debates. I cannot say right now what should be the age ceiling, and also a two-term limit for maybe the prime ministers, maybe three-term limit for ministers, four-term for member of parliaments. There should also be a reservation for the young people in the respective parties and in parliaments. That is what I think. And if these two things are done, two things will happen. Number one, the young people will start entering mainstream politics. They will start to get their space. And number two, the senior leaders will find a way for their graceful exit. And on the question of like dream about coming back home, yes, you should definitely start dreaming about coming back home right now, because now is our time. Now we need your support now more than ever. And if you think you will have to start from zero because you've already been established in a foreign country or something like that, don't worry. The whole country is in a state of zero right now. We will rise from the ashes together.
Thank you, Vivek. Ushaji?
हजुर
हजुरले क्वेसन सुन्नुभयो अघि?
सुनिन, त्यहाँ के थियो भने मेरोमा अलि प्रब्लम आइरहेको थियो।
एउटा क्वेसन थियो कि in light of the recent GenZ protests and the growing wave of public discontent towards political parties, how do you see the future of Nepal's
त्यो मैले नोटिस गरेको छु।
हजुर
अब एक चाहिँ के भयो भने पोलिटिकल पार्टिजहरुमाथि अझ जुन जुन तहमा क्वेसन रेज भएको थियो त्यसलाई चाहिँ अलि त्यसलाई मिनिमाइज गर्ने गरी भोलिपल्टको पब्लिक यो डिस्टोर्ट भयो नि, यो जम्मै यो ध्वस्त भयो नि, त्यसका कारण चाहिँ अझै पोलिटिकल पार्टीलाई थोरै स्पेस चाहिँ बाँकी राख्यो। त्यस भएपछि अनि किन यिनीहरू चाहिँ यो डिस्कन्टेन्ट भएका छन् भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ त्यो त्यो मस्याकरको अघिल्लो दिन हाम्रो पार्टीको चाहिँ स्ट्याट्यु कन्भेन्सन थियो नेसनल, एन्ड त्यो दिन चाहिँ हाम्रो कमरेड ओली चाहिँ निर्विकल्प लिडर हो भन्ने कुरा घोषणा गरेर हाम्रो पार्टीले आएको थियो। जबकि त्यहाँ चाहिँ उहाँको अप्सनल भोइसहरू पनि थियो, अरू मान्छेहरूले उहाँ हुँदैन अब उहाँले छोड्नुपर्छ भन्ने भोइसहरू पनि थियो, तर त्यसलाई दबाइएर आएको थियो। अनि पोलिटिकल पार्टिजहरूको एक खालको भन्यो भने त यो सत्ता त गयो नि त, त्यसपछि उहाँहरू किन खुसी हुनुहुन्छ त? त्यसपछि उहाँहरूमा जुन खालको यो फिलिङ अफ स्याडनेस छ, यसका लागि चाहिँ म यो नेचुरल हो भन्न चाहन्छु। किनभने अन्तर्पार्टी लोकतन्त्र कमजोर भइसके पछाडि चाहिँ के हुने रहेछ भने क्रमशः त्यो लिडरसिप चाहिँ यो सोसाइटीसँग चाहिँ डिस्कनेक्ट हुने रहेछ। त्यसपछि अनि जस्तो अनइलिजिबल मान्छेहरूलाई पनि लिडरसिपले चाहिँ जिम्मेवारी दिने, सत्ताको कुनै न कुनै ठाउँ दिने, भाग दिने, अनि उहाँले काहीँ न काहीँ पोलिटिकल अपोइन्टमेन्ट पाउने, अनि काहीँ न काहीँ राज्य सत्ताबाट चाहिँ तपाईँको यस्तो मन्थली स्यालेरी पाउने करियरिस्टहरूका लागि चाहिँ यो अहिलेको परिस्थिति चाहिँ अलि स्याड नै हो। त्यसो भएर पोलिटिकल पार्टिजहरू चाहिँ अनह्याप्पी छन् भनेर भन्न चाहन्छु।
यसको भविष्य के त? हामी पोलिटिकल पार्टिजमा आगामी दिनमा रिफर्म देख्छौँ कि यही तालले चलेर देश अस्थिरतामा जान्छ कि नयाँ पुस्ताहरू नयाँ पार्टी लिएर आउँछन् जस्तो लाग्छ हजुर?
होइन, जस्तो हामी एकदम ठिक छौँ, हामी पिस प्रस्पेरिटी जस्तो सुखी नेपाली समृद्ध नेपाल भनेर भनेको थियौँ नि त हामीले। अनि डिजिटल प्लेटफर्ममा त एकदम ओभरफिडिङ थियो नि त सत्ताकै राज्यकै तर्फबाट, तर त्यसलाई त जेनजीले अथवा हाम्रो समाजले त नपत्याइरहेको रहेछ नि त। त्यसपछि सबै कुराको अप्सन चाहिँ हुन्छ, तर हामीले यसमा कति मूल्य गुमाउनुपर्छ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ हो। तर आज पोलिटिकल पार्टीहरूले जुन खालको कमिटमेन्ट गरेका छन् त्यो अनुसार नहिँडेको कुरा त सत्य हो नि त। त्यसपछि हामी म जस्तो मान्छेहरूले चाहिँ कमिटमेन्ट अनुसार हिँड भनेर जति प्रेसर क्रिएट गर्न सक्छौँ हामी प्रेसर क्रिएट चाहिँ गर्छौँ। यदि त्यसले काम गरेन भने त अर्को फोर्स त आउने रहेछ नि त। त्यसपछि यो चेन्जेसलाई चाहिँ स्वीकार्नुपर्छ जो कसैले भनेर म भन्न चाहन्छु।
धन्यवाद। प्रोफेसर मुनि, ओभर टु यु सर।
Well, the question you have raised is quite closely linked with regional and international politics. If I link it with the precedences which have taken place in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, in South Asia, the recent, and I can say that for any other situation, largely major transformations are taking place with a cocktail of the domestic unrest and external strategic interests. There is no situation in this globalization where we are all so close to each other, where only one factor works. And Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka are not free from this. The South Asian countries as a whole are caught in two rivalries, US and China on the one hand, and India and China on the other hand. And it is unfortunate that while bilateral relations, Americans want to improve relations with China, India wants to have good relations with China, none of them want China to expand its influence, and nowhere China wants American influence to expand or Indian influence to expand. So this rivalry is very, very much there. And in the last 10 years, the Chinese diplomacy has become far more assertive and aggressive in South Asia, and for very good reasons of their own interests. And I'll tell you how that South Asia as a region is developing at the rate, on an average rate of 5.5 to 6%, all the countries put together. And this is world's largest population concentration. So if 1.6 or 1.7 billion people are growing at the rate of 5.5%, there is no other region in the world which is doing this. And therefore, there is no other country or interest in the world which will not like to be present in South Asia. So India is in a different situation because it is its soft belly. But America, Europe, West Asia, and China would like to have their stakes and interest in South Asia. There was a time when China was not so deeply inclined towards getting into South Asia for its economic and strategic presence, but now it is. Therefore, this competition exists there. And in this competition, Dalai Lama's issue had come up in a big way because Dalai Lama is finding its successor. And China still does not find very confident, itself confident, and it has done many things. We don't have time to go into those details. Many things to have a firm control on Tibet and Xinjiang. But still, both these regions, which are the periphery of China, are turbulent, are unstable, and with Dalai Lama's succession issue, the Chinese are a little worried as to what will really happen. And they don't want to see an American and Indian collaboration so far as China is concerned, particularly in Tibet. Pramod, you are a student of strategic affairs. Recall those periods when American funded the Khampa rebellion in Tibet. And that happened from Nepal. Mustang areas and those regions were there. So the Chinese are very conscious about it and they don't want to see that. But at the same time, and therefore China has expanded its influence as much as it can in the whole of South Asia. Now, Dalai Lama is concerned because Nepal has been one of the entry points of the Tibetans coming from Tibet, coming to Dharamshala and all that. And one more point, which is far more important, that the Hami Nepal organization's leader is identified as being with the group of Free Tibet. So there is a kind of a sympathy and connection, and therefore, when these people have brought about this change, I think Dalai Lama thought he must compliment them. So he has congratulated them. And obvious indication is that he would like Chinese influence not to increase in Nepal, or like to be as much constrained as possible in Nepal. So he has come out and congratulated them, welcomed them. So this is how I see that in the competition, neither India or the US or Dalai Lama's Tibet would not like Chinese influence to get consolidated in the periphery of Tibet, and Nepal being one of the critical points there.
Thank you, sir. Let me come back to you again because there are lots of questions. One is that the movement is spreading from Colombo to Dhaka and now in Nepal. Being the prominent expert on South Asia, do you see it spreading in other parts of South Asia in general or India in particular in days to come? That is one. Second, there is a question like being part of the largest democracy in the world, what would be the consequences if the GenZ movement and the government decides to limit or eradicate the political parties in upcoming government reforms?
Well, it's a question which is being hotly debated in India also, as to what would be the implication of what has happened in Nepal or what has happened in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. And as I said, that there is so far, you see some similarities. In all these situations, the movements or uprisings have been spearheaded by unconventional political groups everywhere. They are not traditional parties. Even JVP is a political party in Sri Lanka, but it was not a dominant party, it was a marginalized party. They are the one who have headed it, number one. This is very, very clear. Secondly, in all the three cases, the governments were perceived as being pro-China by everybody. In Hasina's case, India did not think, India knew that Hasina was balancing China and India, but there was a great camaraderie between New Delhi and Dhaka. But US thought that Hasina is not the right person and she is using China. So in all the three cases, whether it is Prime Minister Modi's government or Rajapaksa's government in Sri Lanka or Hasina's government, there was a perception that they were all pro-China. And therefore, I think India and US may be on the same page so far as Sri Lanka is concerned. But India and the US are in tension with each other so far as Bangladesh is concerned. And I guess so far as Nepal is concerned, India and China seems to be sharing. There are no tears being shed either in Washington or in Delhi about the exit of the Oli regime. I have no doubt about that. But how the future shapes, India may not like any interference, particularly of the external powers like the US. So let us see what really happens. Now, so far as India is concerned, some of these problems are there in India also. Like unemployment amongst the youth is nearly 20%. There is a huge inequality in terms of the distribution of growth. There is a pent-up feeling so far as youth is concerned, and also many of the what you call agricultural sector or SMSEs, and there are problems about it. So in a way, it looks like a situation ready for repetition of what has happened in the neighborhood. But the problem is there are three issues. Number one, the India is too big and diverse. So there are some regions and some areas which are very well developed, very equal, and therefore the whole of the country does not really come on the same page. And secondly, since Nehru's time, in economic development there is a dual policy. While the capitalist growth is making unequal output of the economic development, there is a conscious policy of positive discrimination in terms of reservations, in terms of free rations, in terms of which is kind of addressing the neglected and marginalized sections, which I have not seen happening in other countries. So there are cushions which India has, and if the leadership becomes conscious and sensitive, which I am sure it will, because the level of exposure and maturity of Indian leadership is at a different stage, and it responds to these aspirations of the people and does something. And the third, of course, is controlling liberalism, anti-liberal policies, information blocking and rights blockings, and this should not happen either in India or in Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Also, this happened because the autocratic tendencies of the regime would alienate their people much more. So I have question marks about what India would respond to it, but I think India has a greater capacity to deal with this kind of a situation, and I hope, because I am Indian, that it does not repeat the mistake of what its neighbors have done.
Thank you, sir. Let me go one more last round because we hardly have 20 minutes. Ushaji had a question, sir, what should second rank leader do to change their leadership now that they have GenZ as a stick? Which grid binds them and what will not the grid put further? उहाँलाई एउटा क्वेसन के छ भने तपाईहरू सेकेन्ड ऱ्याङ्क लिडर्सहरू कसरी चाहिँ आफ्नो लिडरसिपलाई परिवर्तन गर्नुहुन्छ? अब तपाईहरूसँग एउटा जेनजी भन्ने एउटा स्टिक पनि छ करेक्ट गर्नलाई, के लोभले सेकेन्ड जेनेरेसन लिडरहरू अहिले अगाडि बढ्न सकिरहेका छैनन्? यदि त्यो लोभ रहिरह्यो भने त्यो पार्टीकै फ्युचर रिस्कमा छ कि छैन? उषाजी सुन्नुभयो हजुरले?
मैले सुनेको छु।
हजुर, म यसमा आउँछु एकछिनमा। अनि देयर लट्स अफ क्वेसन इन मिडिया, तपाईहरू कसैले पनि एड्रेस गर्न सक्नुहुन्छ। देयर लट्स अफ क्वेसन अन इन्डियन मिडिया एन्ड नेपाली मिडिया। One is that what is the role of media in this process? Where do media stand? Does media stand with Gen Z or traditional political forces? Media को रोल के छ? media चाहिँ ट्रेडिसनल फोर्सेस अथवा Gen Z कतातिर उभिएको छ? एउटा नेपाली मिडियालाई हो। So there are lots of questions on Indian media, like role of Indian media is spreading information as portraying this movement as a pro-monarchy movement. Do you see monarchy coming back? Do Indians see monarchy coming back? Who in India wants king back in Nepal, especially when Nepalese don't want the king back? There's very strong questions. There are other questions that there has been some news that anti-Indian sentiment, wherein Indian media personalities were harassed. Can Vivek and Muni share the light on that? So lots of questions in media. The last question is on the advice of Gen Z. Like what advice? What advice would you give to Gen Z for taking Nepal for progress and stability? Where do you see Nepal moving towards in days to come? So Gen Z like के सुझाव दिनुहुन्छ नेपालमा प्रोग्रेस स्टेबिलिटीको लागि? So Gen Z कता जाँदैछ? Let me go in the same order. Vivek and then Ushaji and then Muni sir.
Thank you, sir. So regarding the media sentiment, I will not discuss much about the reputation of the Indian media. Their level of misinformation is on a whole different level. I was shocked to see one headline. They had labeled that Nepal's first Muslim Prime Minister Mohammad Balen Shah. I don't know. I mean, there are speculations. We were also speculating who would be the next Prime Minister, but from where did this term, Nepal's first Prime Minister Mohammad Balen Shah came? This is the level of misinformation that they are spreading. Then there's the question of the monarchy coming back and the question of foreign interference coming inside the whole protest. And this had made a lot of protesters and even other segments of society very upset. And we also remember during the 2015 earthquake, the Indian state was very supportive, but the media, they were selling the tears of our people, and a whole hashtag movement on back of Indian media was spread back then, and a lot of Gen Z people were associated in that, I think. And regarding on how the movement should move forward, I think this is no time to go bargain and like go about who is a legitimate Gen Z. I think we all should be coming under the same umbrella. And I just heard the news just a few moments earlier that some groups of Gen Z who are representing and negotiating with the government, they have started collecting the opinions of Gen Zs from all over Nepal and internationally, and they can also present their opinions online. So I would like to request all the Gen Zs Nepali Gen Zs living across the world to participate in that, and maybe we can have a common voice under a common umbrella very soon.
Thank you, Vivek. Ushaji?
त्यो हाम्रो पार्टीसँग सम्बन्धित क्वेसन्सका लागि चाहिँ म सबैलाई धन्यवाद भन्न चाहन्छु। अनि जस्तो हाम्रो पार्टीभित्रको मुख्य समस्या के हो, अनि सेकेन्ड लेयरको लिडरहरूले चाहिँ किन यसलाई चाहिँ अलि टेक ओभर गरेन भन्ने कुरामा चाहिँ म के भन्न चाहन्छु भने हाम्रो कमरेड ओलीले उहाँ अध्यक्ष हुनुभएको 11 वर्ष भयो, उहाँले जस्तो जस्तो अभ्यासहरू गर्दै आउनुभयो त्यो अभ्यासहरूले चाहिँ खास गरी त्यो डेमोक्रेसीलाई चाहिँ एकदम निमिटान्न पार्यो इन्टर पार्टी डेमोक्रेसी चाहिँ अलरेडी डेड अनि त्यसो भइसके पछाडि मान्छेहरूमा चाहिँ के भयो भने फेरि हामीले सब आन्दोलन सकिसक्यौँ हामीले गणतन्त्र ल्यायौँ अब हामी समृद्धितर्फ लाग्ने हो भन्ने खालको जुन खालको भाष्य क्रिएट गर्यो त्यसमा चाहिँ पोलिटिकल अवेरनेस अनि त्यहाँबाट त्यो लिडरसिपले दिनुपर्ने ट्रान्सपरेन्ट हुनुपर्ने एकाउन्टेबल हुनुपर्ने कुरालाई चाहिँ अलि कम आँकियो त्यसकारण चाहिँ हाम्रो दोस्रो पुस्ताले चाहिँ यो अलि धेरै ट्रान्सफर्मेसनमा अनि त्यो लिडरसिप लिने विषयमा चाहिँ यसलाई अलि म के भन्न चाहन्छु भने यसलाई चाहिँ पोलिटिकल्ली चाहिँ यसलाई चाहिँ डिपोलिटिकल गरियो त्यसो भएर चाहिँ हामीले चाहिँ कमरेड केपी ओलीलाई चाहिँ नेचुरली चाहिँ गुड बाई भन्न सकिएन त्यसका लागि चाहिँ त्यही हाम्रो विगत 10 वर्षमा 11 वर्षमा जुन अभ्यास भयो यो नै हाम्रा लागि बाधक भयो अनि यो पार्टी भन्ने भएपछि कस्तो हुँदो रहेछ भने यो खास गरी कमरेड प्रचण्डलाई हेरेर पनि नेतृत्वको आलोचना नगरौँ नेतृत्वलाई बलियो बनाऊ भनेर जुन खालको चाहिँ नेतृत्व चाहिँ त्यो चाहिँ एकदम ऱ्यासनल मान्छे होइन कि ऊ चाहिँ भगवान् जस्तो एज अ गड जस्तो हुन्छ नि एज अ धार्मिक नेता जस्तो अनि पार्टीलाई चाहिँ एउटा सम्प्रदाय जस्तो बनाइयो यसको मूल्य हामीले चुकाइसकेका छौँ यसलाई ट्रान्सफर्मेसन गर्नका लागि प्रयत्न गरिन्छ भनेर म भन्न चाहन्छु अनि मिडियाको रोल चाहिँ यो बिचमा चाहिँ मिडियाको रोल पनि कस्तो भयो भने नेपालकै मिडियाको कुरा गर्दा चाहिँ गगन थापा र शङ्कर पोखरेल मिलेर आगामी सरकारको चाहिँ रोड म्याप बनाउँदै भन्ने खालको हेडलाइन्सहरू चाहिँ हाम्रो मिडियाहरूले लेख्दै गयो जबकि समाजमा गगन थापा अरू शङ्कर पोखरेललाई मान्छेहरूले एकदम धेरै आलोचनाहरू गर्न थालिसकेका थिए त्यसपछि म यो आजको अवस्थाका लागि चाहिँ म मिडियाहरूलाई पनि उहाँहरू पनि यसबाट चुक्नु भएको छ जसरी दलहरू चुकेका छन् भन्न चाहन्छु र कति धेरै मिसइन्फर्मेसन छ भने त्यसबाट चाहिँ हामीले चाहिँ एकदम कुन चाहिँ हो इन्फर्मेसन भनेर चाहिँ छान्न सक्नुपर्ने स्थिति छ र म जेएनजीलाई चाहिँ टेक अ लिड भन्न चाहन्छु अघि थापाजीको कुरासँग पनि म सहमत छु जस्तो अलि कङ्क्रिट अलि एजेन्डासहित आउनुभयो भने तपाईँहरू टेक अ लिड यति भन्न चाहन्छु
धन्यवाद प्रोफेसर मुनि ओभर टु यु सर
Well, you have leapt up. There are 2-3 aspects of the question put to me. One is on the media, and I agree with you that media is not always either factually correct or objective in their assessment. And that is true with most of the other media. I think there is a great deal of national orientation. And I have no hesitation in saying that I find Nepali media far more free and independent than Indian media. In fact, the established Indian media is with the great business interests. And, within media, this kind of a media is called Godi media, which is really aligned with the establishment. So please don't take the media variations very seriously or as an offense. It is a reflection of our ignorance. And many people have not closely studied or closely understand. And journalists write their stories overnight. So whatever comes to them by hearing that's a story and that a story, they write it. But why different stories come? Because in India, different sections have different relationship with Nepal. There are, for instance, there is an army-to-army relationship between India and Nepal. There is a Hindutva religion relationship between India and Nepal, which is represented now these days by RSS, which also has close connection with the Indian establishment. And therefore, there are constituencies. I have no hesitation in saying, even at the cost of displeasing someone, that there are constituencies within the establishment in India which would like to prefer a Hindu state in Nepal. They openly talk about it. They openly campaign for this. And I think there are RSS offices and branches in Nepal itself. So there is a constituency which wants to see Hindutva to come, and for that matter, monarchy to come. Even for monarchy, I am sorry to say that there are people who don't understand the past of relationship on monarchies count between India and Nepal. There are many who are saying that monarchy should come back so that the communists would be taken care of this. We will have to have only one family to deal with this. And this is a family which has matrimonial relations in India. So we would be very close to them. This is the kind of a feeling which goes on. They forget the fact that monarchy brought in the Chinese influence to begin with, if at all they are unhappy with the Chinese influence. The monarchy brought in Pakistan in Nepal, if at all they are unhappy with the Pakistani presence there. And, anti-aircraft guns came during monarchy. The idea of diluting the treaty came up during monarchy. So there are several aspects of it in which I'm sorry, the historical knowledge is not quite perfect. And this cannot be denied. And let me ask Vivek, if even amongst the Gen Z, there are not pro-monarchy elements. After all, on the 9th, 10th, 11th, the negotiations which were going on, Persai was one of the factors which was being negotiated with. And monarchy would want to come back. There is no doubt about that. But Nepalese should know that Nepal as a Hindu state constitutionally was announced only during King Mahendra in 1962. Nepal is a Hindu society for hundreds of years. So is India for hundreds of years. But a state character and the society's character need not. A state is the negotiator. A state is the independent arbitrator of the society. So it should not assume the same. The Sri Lankans tried to do it, and look what happened to Sri Lanka. Pakistan has tried to do that. What happened to Pakistan? It's not a very good prescription to have a sectarian identity for the state, whether on the basis of religion or language or region or anything you want. So therefore, one has to be very cautious about it. But the monarchy wants to come back, and monarchy wants to come back with Hindutva, because Hindutva gives a legitimacy to monarchy. In Hindutva, theology, king is considered an avatar of Vishnu, who cannot be challenged. Now, that being so, therefore, it needs to be distinguished in a very careful manner. And as I say, if I have always openly and publicly pleaded for Hindutva not being brought in the state, either in Nepal or in India or anywhere else, or Buddhism to be brought in Sri Lanka, or Buddhism to be brought in Myanmar, or Islam to be brought either in Bangladesh or in Pakistan. Wherever a religion domination takes place in a diverse society. If we are homogeneous like Maldives, yes, you can do anything which you want. But if we are not homogeneous, then we must be very, very careful about it. And there are questions about army also, that which I have heard from my Nepali friends, so I'm just sharing it with you. They said why it is that on 9th, the army did not come to the rescue of saving and protecting democratic institutions like Parliament, Supreme Court, the President's official house, the Prime Minister's official house, and Central Secretariat. I think this was a national responsibility. So I think the Army Chief has done a wonderful job of evolving this new interim setup, but they also must explain their people and to the world as to why they let this situation go so bad on 9th of September.
Thank you, sir. You rightly pointed out that King was seen as a Vishnu avatar, and King was Vishnu avatar. I remember one Saturday morning, the Vishnu died, and it was not only the Vishnu died, the whole family member of Vishnu died, 10 members. And we questioned, how can Vishnu die? And how can Vishnu not save his family? If Vishnu can't save his family, how can Vishnu save us? So, and who killed the Vishnu? A member of a Vishnu family, probably Crown Vishnu Prince. So these are the questions that came to us, and I think the whole evolution of Vishnu died that day. The whole concept of monarchy, Vishnu, and all died that day. So I think there is no seed of further germination of monarchy in Nepal. Thank you for that. I think we have to conclude. Thank you so much, Professor Muni.
Sir, I
Sir?
would like to address Professor Muni's question regarding Gen Z and the pro-monarchies agenda, if I
Yes.
can.
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Yes, so Professor Muni, in the initial agenda before the September 8 protest, the videos that were circulating, there was no space for any royalist or pro-monarchy agendas that were given. And Durga Prasad, he was just released from jail, I think, just a month back, and he wanted to join the protest, but the people, the Gen Z, those leaders, influential figures who were in social media, they were urging him not to join. They literally went to his house, they joined their hands and said, please don't come to our protest, please don't come to our protest. And it's true, even during the negotiation process, the army was entertaining Prasad, but the leaders, the representatives of the Gen Zs, they were very adamant about giving no space to the royalists, rejecting the negotiation process. The negotiation process only started after the army assured the Gen Z representatives that the royalist agenda would not move forward.
Thank you, Vivek.
They infiltrated the movement, they used the cover of Gen Z to
Yes,
push
sir.
their agenda.
Exactly. They tried to hijack the movement.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Professor Muni, Usaji, and Vivek for the interesting and insightful remarks. It was really great learning experience, and we thank you for your time. We hope Nepal moves towards peace and stability. I'd like to thank all our participants for their participation and questions. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.